Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden, your host on our weekly adventure into the great outdoors, where we enjoy the companionship of our friends, our dogs, and of course, the beauty that surrounds us. We're in the fields, in the forests, and sometimes even in the water, especially this time of year. And that is the fun of this game. It is an all year long process. Well, we've got a real treat in store for you this week. My friend, author, columnist, chukar hunter Pat Ray, his book, A Chukar Hunter's Companion, is kind of the Bible in our world. If you haven't got it, you will want to get it by the time we're done talking about it this week on the program. But that's not all. We'll talk about the places we go and the things we do and the things we think about while we're out there. That's kind of Pat's thing, and it will be ours as well. Also on the show this week in the Fix It segment, we'll talk about I guess I'll call it an unsung data source when it comes to finding public access. That's all I'm going to tell you about that. And you get one more month's worth of chances to win that 4-pack of pointer shotguns in the Fur Feather Friends sweepstakes. Went to the social media pages to talk about force fetch, so we'll be touching on that very soon. And of course, all of that is brought to you by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Roughland Dog Kennels, Pointer Shotguns, and High Vis Sights. Well, doing a little road work, literally and figuratively, I guess. Traveling a lot, bringing the dog along, of course, and my lovely wife and her little dog as well. But what that means is sometimes we can't get to places where I can run, flick, just let him flat out cover some ground. But I've got a great rig on my mountain bike, so we're putting a lot of miles on that way. He's attached, but he's attached with a great safe designed for police dogs to run alongside their police bikes, which is a weird phrase, isn't it? But anyway, they do use them, especially in Europe, and they use their this hookup for them. Anyway, it works. We get in a lot of miles. It works for both of us. And that's one of my arguments. It's the only way I can stay in shape when I'm on the road. You are thinking, just like I am, about the coming season, and I thought, well, one of the things we've talked about a few times recently on the podcast is retrieving. You know, it's a high priority for many of us. This is the time of year when we can actually do something about it. And I've talked about doing some things that Flick is glomming onto very well, and that is primarily holding longer so that he understands he can't apply too much pressure to that bird. That's the diplomatic way to describe it. But anyway, so I asked on the Facebook and the Instagram pages, Twitter is, well, what are we calling it? X as well. Are we ever going to get over that? Anyway, arguments for and against force fetch training, and boy, did that scratch an itch. To put it mildly, there are some strong opinions on both sides. And it depends. It's like steadiness, and I get that. Everybody has their own definition. And in fact, if you follow the NAVDA world, you know that the gun dog test, which used to be called the utility preparatory test, has changed in that regard as well when it comes to retrieving. But whatever it is, I thought it would be good to expose everybody to arguments for and against and somewhere in between. Marcus Reeve starts us off in the discussion. He says, if your dog hasn't been force fetched, he is not as good as he could be. Mark Cross Jr. makes a really good point, and it's the bumper sticker, but it's elaborated a little bit. That is, conserve game, hunt with a trained dog In other words, Mark says, I can still shoot a bird with an unsteady dog, but an untrained retrieve doesn't always ensure the game makes it back to the bag. And in the end, that's what it is all about. Yeah, very good point, Mark, and one that works for me. Now, whether they bring it back, sit down and hold it until you tell them to give it to you or not, which has its advantages, but, anywhere between there and, chasing after a dog who won't give it back or won't even go and get it, that's a worst case scenario I get. Ted Wentink says, take out the force word and call it trained retrieve. Why wouldn't you do it? If you don't train for it, then you have no command for it and are only hoping for a retrieve to hand. David Good says, it makes good dogs excellent and fair dogs good. Sam Vaselli suggests checking out The Method Dog Training. I guess you could Google that. Training your dog should be about building a relationship with you and your dog. Why use force when you don't have to? And that's a good point. A lot of people would suggest that what we used to call force fetch training, and whatever you want to call it now, does exactly that. You come out better at the other end, both of you. I get it. Greg Idy says it depends on the breed. Absolutely. Robert Murphy is against pain-inducing methods. I think most of us are these days. There are lots of other ways to, quote, force, unquote. And that is a good point to reiterate there. Jack Reynolds talks about the retriever world. Force fetching is almost mandatory. That's a different game altogether, the competitive retriever world. So I understand that. Troy Stark, as with any training, much depends on the trainer and how much force is applied. And I think that's probably a great way to think about it. Force doesn't always mean pain, but it does mean force of will. And that's how a lot of people have described it in past conversations. My biggest fear, and Miles Burdett brings it up, dog brings it partway back, puts it down, that bird's not dead, it runs away, you've wasted a bird, you can't find it again. It's not a good look for us, and it's terrible at the moment because you've just lost maybe the one bird you shot that day. Hey, I need all the help I can get. So we work on that periodically, and it seems to be holding up for me, but no pain involved. Force of will. Matt Shively answers the question for he's for force training because we tried it once without it. So true. Yeah. As I've described in the past, most of my bird dog training is trial and error, and the error is almost always on the shoulders of the operator. Well, good stuff. It's up to you. We want the game back, obviously. If we are in a competitive situation of one sort or another, it's almost always going to be a part of the evaluation. Up to you. Force doesn't need to be pain. That portion of the program brought to you by sageandbreaker.com. Hey, the Father's Day sale is on. You heard it here first. Unless you get their emails, then you heard it there first, before everybody else. Time to save on cleaning bundles, all the soft goods, the range bags and all of that, plus a lot of the consumables. So if you're looking for a gift for yourself, well, send the link to somebody who might bestow upon you that gift. sageandbreaker.com. First thing you'll see when you open that page is the sale notification. Click on that. Go take a look at those great cleaning bundles and everything else with a lifetime warranty. How can you beat it? sageandbreaker.com. And High Vis Sites is where you see what you've been missing. Take a look at the video. You'll see what I'm talking about. You got two eyes. You got to look at two things, a moving target and the muzzle of your shotgun. This is the way to do it. Those patented interlocking light pipes allow you to quickly and easily attain the target while your mind's eye, if you will, is seeing the muzzle. You bring them together, that's when you pull the trigger. See what I mean? Go to HIVIZ sights.com, HIVIZsights.com. Okay, I got to start our interview with a couple stories. I'll start with one. I'll just leave it at that. So there's a place down there, if you go left and then go right and go way down, almost to the Nevada border. And it's pretty popular with certain people with certain proclivities, and I'm one of them, and so is this guy, Pat Ray. I'm pulling into the parking lot on a dreary day. I don't know if it was the end of the season or the beginning of the season. You can tell me. But I pull in and I almost hit this guy as I'm parking because I'm so shocked I hadn't seen him in so long. Pat Ray, welcome to the Upland Nation podcast.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
That was the first time I saw you down there. And I'm looking forward to getting caught up because the last time I saw you was last season. Ran into you and some friends. You were staying at the big house down there. And
yes.
And you found out I had a brand new bottle of secret elixir, and I think we got pretty close to emptying that bottle by the end of the evening. It was a good time.
It was put to good use.
Yes, it was. Pat, if you don't know everybody, Pat Ray with a W is the author of A Chukar Hunter's Companion. That's probably his primary bona fide right here on this Upland Nation podcast. But Pat has a long and storied history in the communications and the content world. So Pat, tell me about yourself.
Oh, okay. Well, came out of college at a time when my services were requested, and I ended up in the Marine Corps, flying helicopters for a number of years, actually, including reserves. It totaled up to 20.
Wow.
And, I enjoyed flying helicopters for the Marine Corps. I refer to a helicopter anymore as the world's finest toy. It was a wonderful way to spend time, and I enjoyed my service. Got out with a hope of becoming a rich and famous freelance writer. I became only one of those things. I became the writer. The rich and famous eluded me, but I kept at it for 6 or 7 years, and at that point I decided it might be a good idea to have a real job. Went to work for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife as an information supervisor, and enjoyed the heck out of the next 13 years or so with them. Learned a great deal about the state, a great deal about the resources, and began seriously considering going back to full-time freelance work. So I did that, and one of the first results was A Chukar Hunter's Companion, which came out in 2003. It's been out a while, but it's also, in my opinion, one of the top, if not the top, chukar hunting texts in existence. I'm real proud of it, and it's done very well, and people that read it tend to reach out to me and send their appreciation. So I'm happy to talk about that book and anything else you want to touch on, Scott.
Well, the book is a jumping off point, and I'm looking forward to that because you really did a service for a lot of us, especially back in 2003. You know, I was still flogging my way through the hills. I'm still learning, and I admit that. And you've helped so many people get at least a foothold in this world, which seems to be very attractive to anybody who picks up a shotgun or owns a bird dog. You know, and that's kind of interesting in and of itself. What is it about chukar hunting that really kind of gets your juices flowing?
Well, for me, it's kind of all about the land, about covering territory in the high desert, and that country calls to me. I love it, and so just the opportunity to cover those hillsides and rim rocks and canyons. It's just pretty much my happy place. The birds obviously are super important, and I love to collect some and have a good meal as a result. But I am never disappointed when I walk out of chukar country without any birds in hand. It's a great way to spend time.
You know, you just put it in a nutshell. That last sentence really kind of sums it up for a lot of us. Back when I was a really active fly fisher, we would, and really bad at it early on, the standard response to, you catch anything? No, I don't go to catch fish. It's all that other stuff, and it's true. But chukar hunting is one of those truly quintessential connection with the earth, the sky, the plants, the critters, in a way that I think carrying a gun instead of a fly rod changes your attitude enough to where what you're saying is absolutely correct. There's so much out there to appreciate and to savor. That makes so much sense to me. What about you? What is there something in particular? Can you narrow it down at all?
I think so. I think the crux of chukar hunting is the fact that it demands a great deal of the participants. You're not wandering around in flat ground looking for quail in the lower 40. You are covering high intensity real estate that demands careful work and also demands dedication. And there's a lot of people who go chukar hunting the first time and never come back. Yeah. There's a lot of them, probably more than others. But there's a good segment of the population that takes that first trip and is hooked by the land, by the difficulty of collecting chukars. They don't ever quite recover. And I'm 76 years old, and I fully intend to continue hunting chukar until one foot won't drag in front of the other.
And I'll see you there. In fact, I've already got some dates for that spot where we both go and cross paths so often, and I'm looking forward to it. But you talk, it's absolutely true. The other thing, and there are very few opportunities for us to end a day totally and completely physically drained. And while it sounds bad, I'm not a very good descriptor on that, but it is what we used to be when we were cavemen. If we didn't, in pursuit of the mastodon with our hunting buddies, we were just tore up at the end of the day. And there's something to be said for that. And I know you can go too far if you've been to the, some of the banquets. There are chukar hunters who only do it so they can fill out their Wranglers the right way. But there's something to be said for complete and total exhaustion, isn't there?
Well, there is. It's one of those things that it's sort of like writing a book. I really enjoy it after I'm done. Yeah, absolutely. When I was, when I published the business newspaper here, I'd spend the last parts of the last day of the week in the press room with the guys running the presses, only because that sound, that rumble, and you've been there, the rumble of that web press tells you one thing. It's too late to do anything else. You're over. Yes. right.
So tell me, how was your season?
Here in Oregon, it was the best that I have seen in 20 years.
Yeah.
The numbers were extraordinary. We had the perfect mix of rain in the spring to bring a good green up, but not too much to damage the clutches and impede the health and growth of youngsters. It was great, and I didn't get any limits during any days. But I think I may be past that, to be honest with you. But I did on one memorable occasion shoot 5 times and get 5 birds, and that for me is a tremendous accomplishment.
Oh, I'll say I've heard about that kind of luck, but it's not luck at all. We know that. But good on you. Anything in the way of a highlight? I mean, where were you that day, for example? How did that all happen?
Oh, there are times when you get into a basin, and I've seen this a few times. It doesn't happen often. You get into a basin where there are 2 or 3, maybe 4 coveys working in there, and you travel the circumference of the basin and get up one covey and maybe shoot 1 bird, but they fly to the next side of the basin, and you continue on, and you are working 3 or 4 different coveys, but you get different shots at different times, and the birds don't leave. They cooperate to the best of their ability. And I got into one of those situations, and the birds were holding really well. They were very cooperative. And my dog, who's sort of coming into her own now, finally at age 6, did a great job pointing, staying steady, and doing great retrieves. So it was one of those times when everything is working for you, and you just have to tip your hat to the hunting gods and say thank you.
That's when I'm walking up on a bird at that moment. I'm looking around wondering when somebody's going to trip me or scare the birds out from under me. There's something magic about that feeling, and it doesn't happen very often. I was down in another one of those big rivers further east from where you and I generally cross paths, and it was like that down this big canyon. Every bird cooperated, and in fact the last bird, I couldn't get it in the air. It was so freaked out. And I finally did. I looked around and I'm thinking, okay, somebody's going to pull a joke. No. Golden eagle circling overhead.
Wow.
Nobody wanted to leave that area. So It worked for me too.
That's great.
Tell me about your dog, 6 years old and coming into its own. Give me more.
Oh, her name is Bailey. She's a German short hair, total liver-colored short hair. Very sweet dog, very submissive around other dogs, which I really appreciate because she gets along with everybody. We never have never have a chest-up face-off problem with Bailey. She was a slow starter, not because of her fault, but because when we first got her, I immediately made a mistake while cutting firewood and dropped an alder tree on my leg and crushed it a little bit. And so I missed that season when I would have had her out at the age of 7 to 10 months. Mm-hmm. She didn't get to go at all. And the following season was a COVID year, and we were drastically curtailed there. So at any rate, she really didn't start getting into birds fairly until she was about 3. And I was a little concerned with her about her development. But then starting 2 years ago, she started really hitting on all cylinders. And this last year, she did fantastic, as I'd mentioned before.
When you also mentioned steadiness and retrieving, and in the opening segment of the program, we talked a lot. I talked a lot with some of our social media friends about retrieving. How do you define steadiness for Bailey?
Oh, okay. that's a good question, because although I belong to NAVDA, the North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association, and I take her to trainings and things of that nature, I have never required her to be steady to wing and shot, because my bird hunting almost completely is dedicated to chuckers. I don't necessarily want her to remain steady until I let her go after the shot. I want her to be moving and following that bird, so when it dives over a hillside, she has a concept of what direction it went.
Yeah.
So I'm not a dedicated trainer to the concept of wing and shot and chucker hunting, but for me, steadiness requires her to wait until I'm coming up on her, and then if she needs to relocate, she can do so slowly, and then she needs to stay there until the birds get up.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of a ridge line. I'm looking at a ridge line that's so bare you can see that you don't know what it is, but there's some movement. It looks like the ground is kind of bubbling.
Yeah.
And I'm 200 yards down the hill, and my dog's over there just trembling. He's just quivering the whole time. You know what's going to happen. And so you get on all fours and you go all the way up all of that rock to try and get there before he moves in on the birds and you can't get a shot at him. But right. Many times that's plenty. And many times they come down the hill. And once every season I actually hit one.
It's anything can happen here in America, Scott. And both.
That's why I keep trying. Yeah.
I like going in on a dog that's holding birds, and there have been multiple times over the last few decades that I've been lucky enough to have a dog that would, break the code with those birds and figure out the way to look them in the eye and say, it's not a good idea for you to run or fly. Stay here with me. And then, 10 minutes later, I wheeze my way up the hill and she's still holding for me. And that's kind of worth the price of admission. And,
there's no rhyme nor reason to that. We see that on bare ground when the birds can see the dogs and vice versa. And we can also see it. And I have a good friend who suggests those birds, they hide behind, especially if you're in good bunch grass country, they'll hide behind the bunches. And if they can't see the dog, but they can hear the dog, then they'll hold still. Whatever it is, I don't get it enough, but it does work. Absolutely. You know, while we're on that topic, I found that is even more prevalent with Hungarian partridge. Did you run into a lot of Huns in the last 2, 3, 5 seasons?
In certain parts of the state, you can expect to see Huns particularly in the grassland, not necessarily in that rocky stuff that attracts chuckers as much. But the places where I hunt, I generally am in Huns 2 or 3 times of the year.
Yeah,
probably no.
Interesting.
But I like hunting Huns, especially with a young dog, because they tend to be a little bit more cooperative. They hang tight a little bit easier, and they don't fly away as far. So you can usually catch up to that covey and give them another run.
Yeah, I described it as the country as Chukar Light, L-I-T-E.
Yes, good.
I think I wrote a story about it once. The boulders are smaller, the grass is shorter, the hills are not quite as dramatically steep. And if you're in that thinking you're going to find chuckers, you might, but you might find Huns as well. And they do hold. They hold way better, and I'm grateful for that, believe me. In fact, I'm going after, I found a covey last season out near where we are, and I'd never been in that spot before. I'm hoping I'll find it in that same basin again this season. So, got my fingers crossed.
The chances are good that you will.
Yeah.
If winter is not too awful, the chances are very good that they'll be back into that ground.
Yeah, have you noticed that over the years? You've been doing this even longer than me by quite a while, and I mean that in a good way. But if if I went to a spot, well, opening weekend I do. I hit some of the spots that I know will deliver for me. And quite often they do. Have you seen the same thing? Do these birds stay pretty close to home over the generations?
Usually, however, the weather patterns in that rough country that chukars inhabit often are highly variable from mile to mile. We have microclimates that develop in canyons that might not exist anywhere within a circle of 20 miles.
Yeah.
So you'd find chukars in that little canyon, but they won't be anywhere nearby. And so within reason, you can expect chukars to be in the same ground that you have seen them in years past. But that is very dependent on the weather, the strange weather patterns that we often experience. The other thing is the thing that has been terribly impactful for chukars and the hunters are wildfires.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've lost hundreds of thousands of square miles from wildfires that are not going to be chukar ground for years.
I talked to some biologists, not particularly about the chukar, but about wild birds in general, and they would echo that, and even a minor problem. And yes, a wildfire is devastating, but even something as simple as a herd of cattle walking through a canyon, or a predator of one sort or another, they'll put birds away for 2, 3, 5 days or weeks. And, something like a catastrophic wildfire, there's nothing to eat. So there's no reason for them to come back.
Right.
Hey, we're just getting warmed up around here. This is the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. That's Pat Ray, the author of A Chukar Hunter's Companion. We'll talk more about the book and some of the more nitty-gritty stuff in there, as well as my Fix-It segment, a new old information source when you're looking for public access, and our word of the week and the earshot, pardon the pun, at a 4-pack of pointer shotguns, all coming up right after this. Yeah, speaking of pointer shotguns, they're the ones giving away that 4-pack if you go to furfeathersfriends.com. But right now, go to pointershotguns.com. Take a look at that new FT12 semi-automatic. Boy, it's getting some great reviews, and it's now available at pointer shotgun retailers all over the country. A new shipment just in, case colored, lots of colors from Cerakoting. You name it, they got it in the way of that new semi-auto. And all those sub-gauges. If you're looking for an over and under or a side-by-side and something other than a 12-gauge, they've always got some in stock at many pointer dealers. Go to pointershotguns.com or go visit Sportsman's Warehouse, Bass Pro, Cabela's, Turner's Outdoorsman. They've all got pointers in stock all the time. And when I'm meeting Pat somewhere like that, if I lean to the left, I can almost see over the ridge. I'm probably carrying Flick in his Roughland kennel. It is part of the Ultimate Travel system, which includes dog bowls, storage trays, all sorts of water carrying and storage devices, dog food storage. Learn more about all of the items they have that can outfit your truck in the way you and your dog like it most. Go to roughlandkennels.com. And rough is spelled just like your dog would say it, R-U-F-F. Roughland Kennels. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. Pat Ray, author. The book most relevant to us, of course, is A Chukar Hunter's Companion. But Pat, you've also written a couple other books. Does everybody who writes about bird hunting have a novel in their bottom drawer of their desk?
I suspect that everybody, period, a novel stuck in the bottom. Freelance or fiction writing has always been my dream. I wanted to take it up shortly after I got out of college. The world demanded different things from me, including a family. But I really like fiction. I really love writing fiction. My first fiction attempt is called Gift of the Grenadier, and it's a novel set back in late Vietnam days. And I think it's very powerful. It's gotten great reviews. You can find it in Amazon or anywhere that carries good books. So I'd highly recommend it. My second novel is just in the look for an agent status. It's called Coming Around, and it's a novel about domestic terrorism.
Wow.
And and other humorous subjects, I guess.
Well, good luck. I hope in terms of topicality, some agent ought to be interested and some publisher ought to be interested in that.
I hope so. I think so.
Well, good luck on that. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I tried writing fiction. It's like writing humor. You're good at writing humor, and you did that a lot. But I just can't go there. Maybe I just have too miserable a life for either of those.
Humor is it's a gift and perhaps a curse.
Yes,
because about 2/3 of the things I try fall flat. But over the years, I was lucky enough to write back page humor columns for several magazines and kept it up for decades. So I really enjoyed it, loved it, still infuse much of my work with humor, but serious novels are where I am now.
Wow. Well, good luck on that. I love it. Let's get back to a less serious book. I don't know that I'd call it a novel because while it is great literature, it's about the stuff we like. It's a Chukar Hunter's Companion is kind of a how-to book to a great degree. So let's talk about some of that stuff. When somebody says, I'd love to try that, and we talked about it earlier, what are the first pieces of advice you would give somebody who wants to try chukar hunting?
Well, obviously, the most important thing is to start by reading my book. But after that, it's very easy to find out where chukar populations are in your state. And a quick call to the local game manager, local district biologist will give you an idea. But in general, you're looking for desert country, high desert country with rocks, sagebrush, and having a little bit of cheatgrass is usually a good thing as well because it's an important food source for chukars. And then it's a question of getting out there, making sure that you are familiar with the ownership of the land, and maybe that's a big reason why I have focused so much on chukars, because so many of the birds are found on federal public land. And you don't really have to ask permission. Once you've figured that out, you take off on probably a diagonal up the hill and searching for seeps, green spaces, places where they might be hiding, little pieces of level ground, benches and such. And sooner or later, you'll probably find a bird. Get a bird or 2 or 12 up and then continue to hunt in that direction and stay pretty much at the level where you found them, because a lot like fish are found in similar depths in a lake. They follow the temperatures and the availability of food. So too do chukars stay in very similar elevations. So that's a pretty good way to start, I think, and there's always some things that need to be considered. You want to make sure you've got water for your dog and for yourself. You have good medical equipment in the event that scrapes and cuts and broken things occur. And then it's always a good idea as well to have a GPS system of some sort so that you can find your way back.
Yeah, I just wrote a story about not being able to find my way back out there in that country, but clearly, and to the dismay of very few of you, I did survive. I couldn't put any of that better than you just put it. I mean, in a nutshell, that's exactly that is a great bit of starting advice. Once we're up in those hills, you talk about water and availability of water, and as the season goes on, things change, and the trope is, well, if it rains, there's water on every shallow, rock indentation up in the hills, so you don't have to go down to the creek bottoms or whatever. But what about snow? What's been your considered experience when it comes to chasing birds, where the snow is up in the high country, but it's not all the way down to the valley floor?
A lot of it depends on depth, and temperature and time that the snow has been on the ground. Has it melted and frozen? Is it something that they can walk across easily, or is there 6 inches of powder that they would have to push their way through? Snow in small quantities, I love it. I like to be able to track the birds and read the signs a little bit more easily than otherwise. I don't want it to be melted and frozen, leaving a slick sheet on the rocks where I'm going to fall and damage my shotgun. Other than that, the snow is sort of just dependent, I guess. It's either on your side or not.
The only thing I would add to that is if it does melt and freeze, pretty soon the birds can't scratch through it to find a food underneath it. So if that's all you got, you probably ought to get down below it. But like you, I think what you've talked around is there are birds, they're walking around in the snow all the time.
Absolutely. It's a way of their life. And as you reflected there, the only time that chukars are going to be seriously damaged in heavy numbers is when there's a bunch of snow and it freezes or thaws, freezes a couple times, and they just can't get through it. And if there's a foot, 2 feet of snow like that, then there's going to be birds starving. That's when you find birds that are kegged up in river bottoms eating thistle and slowly wasting away. And that'll result in heavy population losses at times.
Yeah, in years past, it's been a long time since it's happened, but in really vicious winters, they've actually cut the season short in several western states just so that there would be some holdover at some point in the population dynamic. What about the opposite? In early in the season, which is when I'll be down in that spot we both like. I know enough about where the water sources are and can find them. But is there any advice you would offer to a beginning or an intermediate hunter about how to hunt water, how to find birds near, or how to find water near birds?
Most of the good high resolution maps show water sources, and not just natural in seeps and springs, but developed water sources as well. And so those should be a part of every chukar hunter's backpack. And in the early season, though, those maps are not going to necessarily be accurate. I know of one man that I detailed in the book who had a beautiful setter and took off on an October day, nice October day, carrying plenty of water for himself. He wasn't worried about his dog because he knew of several springs and seeps. As it turned out, all of those springs and seeps were dry when he got a few miles away. And the dog was in desperate condition and ended up having a stroke, which affected the dog's life for the rest of its life. Was terribly damaged dog. So I would caution anybody in the early season to make sure you got water for you and your dogs, and don't necessarily count on the historic springs and seeps.
I concur wholeheartedly, and I would only suggest one other thing to add to that, and that is the challenge with a chukar hunt most times is you spend the first hour just basically walking uphill. And then you walk around when you get up on the top of the hill, and then you walk up another hill, etc. Pretty soon you're 2-3 hours into the hunt, and that far from your truck, and you're out of water.
Right.
So your choices are pretty slim. You either keep hunting and you both dehydrate and possibly endanger your dog, or you quit the hunt. Bringing another half gallon of water might have solved that problem. So, a lot more water than you might think. Am I summarizing that in a way that you would agree?
I sure would. It kind of reminds me of something that I wrote in the book. It was actually in a humorous vein, and basically these are the laws of Chukar physics. And the Chukar law of light and vision is this: the top is a mirage. There is no top. You can keep going to what you think is the top, but there's going to be another top in front of you. So it's easy to get overextended in that kind of country.
Yeah, that might be the understatement of the conversation so far, but it's
well. The other law of Chukar physics that bears mention here is the shortest distance between 2 points is always up.
And may I add a corollary?
Sure.
When you think you're walking across the hill, you're traversing the hill, gravity is pulling you downhill all the time, and you're going to have to make that up at some point.
Yes. It's much easier to keep your elevation than it is to gain it.
Never give up altitude. Except in one case, and I want to talk with you about that, because this is where a lot of chukar hunters, either by design or default, kind of meet disappointment face on. Dog goes on point. They're almost always pointed across a hill, sideways, or pointing down the hill. We all walk in via the dog, so we're walking past the dog. The birds, if they've held long enough, will get up and fly further down the hill. So we start at a disadvantage. The birds are already downhill. How far, we don't know. And then they get up and they're further down the hill. We're taking a downhill shot at distant birds. Do you have any advice for a better way to approach a situation like that?
Yeah, I have lots of advice, but I don't know how much any of it's worth. Here's the thing. Chukars are always going to, if they have any choice at all, the chukars will, number one, fly away from you. Number two, fly downhill. Number three, fly with the wind. And you can count on those things, as I said, unless they are drastically restricted in their choices. So knowing those three things, you can take the time to position yourself to take away one or two of those choices. That's probably as good of advice as I could give for any chukar hunter.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. If you think about those things, and which that generally means most of the time is, yeah, get downhill of your dog. And it does two things for me. Number one, I have enough trouble shooting. I can't shoot downhill, birds flying downhill, so I can get at least level with them. And and number two, in that way you've restricted one of their escape routes as well.
Right.
So good stuff. Let's talk about the dogs for a couple minutes. By the way, that's Pat Ray. He's the author of A Chukar Hunter's Companion. And if you want to learn more about the book and order it, go to Pat Ray, W-R-A-Y, patray.com. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast. Pat, other considerations for a Chukar dog, and by that I'm meaning maybe preparations before the season, during the season, whether it's health, injuries, prevention, etc.
Yes. One of the things that I've seen over the years that's a most common ailment for dogs while hunting chukar is the condition of their feet. And I've known multiple people, friends and acquaintances, who get their dog out. They've been working with the dog in along the parks and yards around their home. They get out to the rocky ground, and the dog can't make a full day's hunt because its feet are too tender and too torn up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And although, there are times when every dog is probably going to need boots, a dog that's well prepared, that's been running on rock roads and covering ground in the sort of terrain that will be equally hard on his feet as the chukar hunt will be, they're going to be the ones that make it 2, 3, or more days hunting without problem.
Yeah, it is critical. And again, I'm the master of worst case scenarios because I've lived through them all, I think. But the last thing you want to do is go on a 5-day chukar hunt and have to quit at the end of the second day.
No, boy.
And now is the time to work on that with your dog. I'm going to just thank you for that one because it does bear repeating over and over again. I'll probably talk about that in a Fix It segment down the road, everybody. What about the birds themselves? Do they behave differently than our lower 40 valley quail or South Dakota pheasants? Do we need to train any way differently with our dogs?
Oh gosh, I think that a good hunting dog is probably a good hunting dog on most species of birds. Chukars are tough because they're not, given their druthers, they don't want to hold, and it takes a dog a few years on wild chukars before they can figure out the best way to convince those birds not to go anywhere. But a well-experienced chukar dog is worth his weight in gold in that regard. The birds are different, obviously, not only just between the species, but also during the time of year. You can expect chukar cubbies to be larger and more likely to hold tight early in the season before they've been shot a bunch, before they've had dogs work on them a lot. That's not always true. I've seen plenty of early October birds that got up wild. But as a general rule, you can expect the birds to hold tighter and stay longer in the early season. That's why in the early season, I'm always shooting a light 20 gauge. And in the late season, I often switch to a 12 gauge double that gives me modified and full choke.
I have a theory on that also. I think much like sharp tails, we know most chukars will have a sentinel bird in each covey, and he's on the high spot. And if you can find him and see him, there's no doubt he can see you. But you can work around that depending on where he is. Even putting a sneak on the birds if you got any cover as well. The other thing that came to mind when you were describing that was chukars are the classic dog training bird. The old timers will say, let the birds train the dog. He'll learn, how to be steady and how what the distance is between him and the birds. Yeah, they will. If you can find them and you can train on them, and in many states we can't. But I found myself, at least, that the key is ensuring that our dog slams that point and holds it as far away from the birds as possible. Do you have any experience with that basic idea?
Well, maybe not as much in situations where it worked exactly like I wanted it to.
Yeah.
But I have followed a slow-moving, careful dog many times for more than a quarter mile as we worked into the wind for the scent that she picked up a long, long way away. And I've also done the same thing behind dogs that were very carefully tracking birds that were running away from us. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity to wish your dog was a little tighter and closer than they were. But as you said, it's a good thing to have them lock up and let you know that the birds are in the area pretty far away if that's a choice.
Yeah, some of the French clubs, dog clubs, will have a term. I think they call it couler, where that once the dog has located birds and the human is involved in it again, then they'll allow their dog to do that creeping. It's strategic creeping, and it works. And you're right. I've had the same thing happen. In fact, I've walked through a covey a couple times thinking it's further down than how far it really was. But I love that idea, and it sounds like maybe a little bit more training is going to be in order around here. We could talk all day, and we will do this again down the road, maybe down that road at that place. But for now, if you were going to, just leave us with one more bit of advice, Pat Ray, author of A Chukar Hunter's Companion, maybe it's the last paragraph of your book or the first paragraph of your book. What kind of advice would you offer up to folks who are tempted, very tempted to try this fascinating sport?
I would say to folks that are considering taking up chukar hunting that it will be the most rewarding, addictive sport that you can imagine. If you go into it with the right attitude and the right preparation. And I wouldn't know how to recommend anything more strongly than that. Chukar hunting might not be to everyone all that it has been to me, but it certainly has been a major part of my life and one of the most rewarding parts of my life. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, join the cult. We welcome all comers. If you're ever down our way, I always have a jug with me. We'll toast you and teach you the secret handshake. Pat Ray, thanks for being so helpful to me over the years and to everybody else. Hey, if you want the book, go to Pat Ray, W-R-A-Y, patray.com, the author of A Chukar Hunter's Companion. Pat, I'll see you sometime this season, somewhere down there. In the meanwhile, thanks so much for being on the Upland Nation podcast.
I look forward to it, Scott, and thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And still some learning to go on around here, if that's what you're up for. The Fix It segment, an old school data source you may not have considered when looking for public access and wild birds. And our word of the week and the prize from high-vis sights. It's all coming up right here on the Upland Nation podcast, brought to you in part by Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School. They hunt and they know what works. When you need help with your shooting, go to midvalleyclays.com, schedule yourself a lesson, or if you're shopping for a sub-gauge gun, or any other gun for that matter, they've got quite a selection, especially in the sub-gauges, that's always in stock. Call Dave Fiedler. He knows guns and hunting. He can find those hard-to-get shotguns. They'll ship anywhere. Let him be your first phone call when you're just starting to think about upgrading your guns. He might have some thoughts that you hadn't had, and isn't that always helpful? Go to midvalleyclays.com. And fueling your dog, whether a chukar hunt or that South Dakota pheasant hunt, is always critical. That's why we go to ProPlansport.com when we are learning more about ProPlan Sport dog food from Purina. Yeah, it's nutrient dense, always 30% protein, 20% fat. Yeah, meat is the first ingredient. 100% complete and balanced nutrition for highly active dogs like yours and mine. You know, only one brand fuels the most sporting dog champions. It's ProPlan Sport from Purina. Your dog needs nutrition that performs as hard as they do. Learn more at ProPlansport.com. Well, you know, I have boxes full of these data sources. They are retired to the shop most of the time, but even now, to this very day, in the Fix It segment, I will laud and sing the highest praises of colored ink on dead trees. Yeah, old school maps. For two main reasons. Number one, because there's so many colors, it's easy to find the good stuff. If you've looked at old school maps enough, you know blue is usually state-owned land, brown is usually Bureau of Land Management, green is usually Forest Service, and then there's a bunch of other colors. But that helps a lot. Also, there are things on those maps that never make it to the digital versions. Oh, and vice versa. Don't get me started on that. I got a helicopter story for you. But if you are looking for more public access, try this. You know where you're going. Get the map. The bigger, the better. Wallpaper one of your den, man cave, office walls with that big map. And then whenever you take a moment to stretch or drink a coffee, just ponder it. You'll find things on there, whether it's the name of a draw or a water source that wasn't anywhere else. You'll get a clue somewhere that you can lodge in the back of your mind, or maybe mark, put it on your digital map so it's available there. Plus some great history. Next time you're looking for new ways to find wild birds, put up a paper map and study it hard. Yeah, that's our Fix It segment this week. I hope it helps. And it's time now for our Fur Feathers Friends Word of the Week. That's how you enter to win. Number one, a set of high-vis light pipe sights this week. And you're entered to win that 4-pack of Pointer shotguns. Side by side or over and under, 12, 20, 28, and 4 10s. Yeah, all 4 just for you. Go to furfeathersfriends.com, fill out the entry form, and then when you get to the blank spot for the word of the week, that's how you're eligible for those high-vis sights. This week, the word is chukar. Of course it is. Chukar is the word. furfeathersfriends.com. And that segment of the program brought to you by TrueLockChokes.com. Pat alluded to tightening up his chokes later in the season. That's probably true of a lot of people in a lot of places. If you're looking to upgrade your choke assortment, you can't go wrong. TruLock chokes are precision made. The tightest tolerance is in the industry. State-of-the-art CNC equipment. Yeah, their quality control program ensures that you are happy. They offer a satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty. Go to TruLockChokes.com. Sign up for the email notifications. That way you find out when there's a sale or other promotions. Lots of add-ons and freebies. Check it all out at TruLockChokes.com. Well, I sure appreciate your help, Pat Ray, taking us to school on chukar hunting. And if you all want to learn more about him and his book, A Chukar Hunter's Companion, go to patray.com, Pat, W-R-A-Y, patray.com. Pat, I'll see you down there sometime this season. Hey, if you appreciated the podcast, I'd sure appreciate your telling everybody about it. The best way is to leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts. That's how we grow around here. And grow again, we are. Thank you to our sponsors who make it all possible. Roughland Dog Kennels, Purina, ProPlan Sport Dog Food, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TruLock Choke Tubes, Pointer Shotguns, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, and High-Vis Shooting Systems. Sign up for the monthly, it's every other week, newsletter at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Always something new there to lock on to, whether it's a video, a podcast, a bonus, new article, it's all there at findbirdhuntingspots.com. And until we meet again here, I hope you're out training and getting your dog in shape for chukar season or quail season or rough grouse season. It doesn't matter. I'll see you at the training days. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to the Upland Nation Podcast.